Everyone is, of course, asking themselves what kind of person could do this and how does a parent even begin to explain this to their kids. So right now we are getting insight from the chairman of the forensic panel who examines some of the most complex homicides in America, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Michael Welner. We're glad you're here. I have a lot of questions, so we're going to get right to it. Sure. Adam Lanza, as we know, it killed his mother, drove 5 miles to the Sandy Hook Elementary School to slaughter 20 first graders and 6 adults. And I think everyone is just asking, parent or not, like, how does something like this happen?
Well,
what's the mindset?
I want to perhaps put everybody at ease by saying that this is the end point of a pathway. But let's recognize that it's a pathway and there are places where we can intersect and intervene to make a difference. It starts with someone who is fundamentally resentful and alienated and blames others. All right? And then it progresses from there to someone who identifies with the idea of destruction as a matter of stature. And then the person becomes increasingly withdrawn as they get a little older and they have social or sexual frustration and incompetence. And then from there they become, and this is a key step, they become invested in the idea of blaming everybody around them. Along the way, the 24-hour news cycle is taking these people who are angry at the world and building them up as larger than life, just as, for example, we saw the picture of him behind us, and we would otherwise be a totally unremarkable person. And they identify with the mass killer. And then, and this is, I want to compliment the Connecticut police for doing this, they know what he says his motive is. They're not telling us, and that's they've been on his computer, they know what he's written, they know what his stated grievance is, but the point is, this is indefensible. There is no grievance. Just let me make this point. He sees, and that could be a person watching this program, which is chilling, could be a child of anybody in this room, who says, you know what? He sees us saying, we failed, and he taps into the idea that people deserve this. And there are a few individuals out there, and this is irrespective of mental illness. Some of them are ill, some of them are not. They adopt it as an ambition. This is not about a mental illness. This is about a life choice. A person makes a life choice that at some point he is going to be a mass killer. And when that happens, it's a question of a determination of when is that going to happen. And he begins to plan. None of it is spontaneous.
And he's not mentally ill?
Some of them are, and some of them aren't. But my point is, it's a life choice that a person with an illness may make, or a person... Look, Anders Breivik was not mentally ill in Norway. He made a life choice, and he planned extensively, and when he decided, my life is a failure, they get invested in the destruction.
Too,
so this is a pathway.
Okay, but I have 2 questions. Number 1 is, why do they target children? And number 2, if you see something like this in your family, and people have been talking about it now, what do you do? Some of the mothers have said, we see this, we know this, but we don't get any help, and you can't arrest this person. What do you do?
Right. Well, I want to address 2 points. First of all, the major myth of this, that we are all making a mistake about, is to focus on guns and mental health at the bottom of this. Guns may make things worse. Guns may be a contributor. Some people are mentally ill and deserve help and need help and aren't getting it. I get it. But that's not why this is happening. Guns have been around for a long time. Just a minute, let me explain. Guns have been around for a long time.
That's why they're rushing you.
This is a really very key point. We're seeing a proliferation. It's going to happen again. It's going to get worse, and it's going to target children. Why? Because you're shocked, and you'll talk about it. When somebody does a shooting at the workplace, the news media doesn't talk about it anymore. But if we're shocked enough, everybody's going to ask, who is this clown? Who is this pervert?
He's dead.
But that's not the point. The point is that he has decided that he wants to have a legacy which is given to him by tremendous interest in him and what he is about. So shock is the reason, and also these individuals know the bigger the body count, the more likely there's news media coverage. What is it about small children? They're defenseless. They're defenseless. And that's why a person takes a high-caliber automatic weapon, because you can kill more, and because the children are defenseless, and so we will give them relevance.
We are back with forensic psychiatrist Dr. Michael Welner. Dr. Welner, they say that Adam Lanza may have been mentally ill. He may have had a personality disorder. There were reports that he was autistic. In this whole thing, where does mental illness have a role?
Well, this is based on my experience in working in cases where people either killed themselves or having had the opportunity to sit and not only study cases, but to interview people who carried out mass shootings. There are 3 symptoms that are the most important issue to concern oneself with. 1 is suspicious and resentment. 2 is hopelessness. And 3 is identification with destruction, just a fascination with destruction. Now, none of that is part of autism.
No.
So you ask the question of, well, what does one thing have? Well, here is what may prove to be an issue. That someone who is diagnosed with a developmental disability may have great difficulty communicating. So if he was at a place where he was becoming ill and had something in which these symptoms were part of his illness, it might have been harder to detect because he was peculiar or he related differently, and it would not have been easy to witness a change. Now, again, we know very little, but autism is not the issue, but autism may have been the cloak that may have made it difficult for even someone who cared and loved him so much to keep this from being discovered.
What do you think of the mother? That Nancy.
This is a woman who was shot 5 times in the face. I have nothing terrible to say to her. You know, we may find that she tried to be a hero to stop this. And that basically she was standing in front of him and said, you have to go through me, and he did. And so I think we need to respect the dead. That's my position on that.
So why, I mean, we spoke with Chris about this earlier too. Ultimately, why does this continue to happen? And then how do we prevent it how do we stop this cycle?
Here's a key thing to learn. Again, this is a phenomenon that's exploded over the past 20 years or so. So why? Because guns and mental health have been around for much longer than we're much more sophisticated about mental health. There's 2 key ingredients. 1 is a 24-hour competitive news cycle that can take people from being completely anonymous in a celebrity-driven culture, which really distinguishes America, and make them larger than life. And so that's one ingredient. The other is we've become better at making escapism perfect. And so now we have an industry, video game violence, that essentially feeds addiction in a way that the tobacco companies built a better nicotine and a better cigarette that it becomes a drug. So for someone who's already isolated, who's already developmentally disabled, who already has difficulty connecting, the worst thing you can do, and this is some advice to parents, which we'll touch on in a minute, is to allow that isolation to be perpetuated, especially in a medium that gives points to killing people. Think about it. Wow. This was a crime that's more than a mass shooting. He killed these people like an arcade game. Who fills people up with 11 bullets and 5 bullets? Medical examiners, I will tell you this as a forensic scientist. We don't see that. That is the end point of dehumanization. And that is the end point of video game violence. It's just like guns. Some people can handle it, some people can't. Your children do not benefit at all constructively from video game violence. Stop allowing your kids access, just as you wouldn't give them access to cocaine. And
about talking to the kids.
Well, I want to end, or at least make an optimistic note. I can tell you unreservedly, and this is based on experience, I can't say this about all homicide. Mass homicide is a social phenomenon. It will get worse, and it can be totally eliminated, and each of us can make a difference.
How?
Example.
How?
Okay, parents. Teach your children at the beginning to take personal responsibility. If they don't start blaming others, they'll never get there. Teach your children resilience when they're hopeless. Teach them that some people get up. Teach them that some people will go forward. Keep them away from video game violence.
Also, keep it out of the house, because sometimes it's the parents who are playing these games and they play it with their kids. Just wanted to say.
100%.
Okay.
Don't pay for violence. Why should you be paying money for your children to see a violent movie? If you take the economy out of the violence industry, you will extinguish it.
Right.
You will extinguish it. They're simply feeding the beast. Second, what can neighbors do? What can neighbors do? Give an example of supporting strangers. Model empathy, because kids may not get it in their own home. If you teach people how to have regard for someone who's struggling, again, keep in mind these are individuals who are crawling into the cracks.